Hey, so I wanted to make a video that dealt with the early days of composing and what it's going to be like to get jobs that are not paid, jobs that offer, exposure for you and all that kind of garbage. Because right now I am doing some paid work. Most of the work that I do is paid, but some of it is not. And certainly when I was starting, a lot of it wasn't because I wanted exposure. I wanted the opportunity to get my music out there. So this video is also semi-inspired by a Facebook post that I made a little while ago at the beginning of the year, just sort of venting and trying to help people who are working in a freelance way, which you will be, and I am, not make really dumb mistakes and not fall for, propaganda and silly promises and all the rest of it. So there's three things I want to cover. The first one is be very wary of the word exposure. A lot of people are out there and they use this word on young composers, or doesn't have to be young, whatever, emerging composers. They'll say, we will totally put your work out there. We have a great platform for you. We can't pay you, but the exposure is going to be, crazy. Exposure is a word used by people who think that you underestimate yourself or you don't really understand your value. And it's very tempting and very kind of seductive because you think that by handing over hard work, something's going to come from someone seeing it who's going to tell someone else and tell someone else. And eventually they'll go, hey, we got a check for you. Do you want to write? It doesn't work like that. Be careful about exposure. I mean, a really good example a friend told me once is imagine a bar just opened up in town and you and a bunch of friends go up to it and you say to the owner, hey, is it cool if we drink all night, all your beer, all your cocktails? We can't pay you, but we're going to drink everything, and then tomorrow we're going to tell our friends about this bar. It's so great. It'll be great exposure for you. That's crazy, right? Like, who would ever go for that? That's ridiculous. The same thing applies to you. Why would you give your hard work away at the promise of exposure? If anything, I've learned that people who are offering that usually don't have an amazing platform to showcase your work. It can either go one of two ways. I mean, and this is why you have to do your research. LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, look this person up who's offering this platform to you, because more often than not, they're just saying that because it's a buzzword, it's exciting, and they're trying to manipulate you. Also, you might find that after you do a bunch of work, a bunch of digging and research on this person, they're fronted by some other company, and that person has more than enough money to pay you. So be very, very careful. Do your homework and ignore the sort of prospect of exposure in exchange for your hard work, because more often than not, it's BS. Number two, always get a deposit. Can't stress this enough. I was recently working on a movie. I met this director through Facebook, and he said that there would be money involved, but not until they got their crowdfunding campaign organized. So I said that's no problem. They have like a pretty high goal. So I figured, even if they didn't reach the goal, there would still be money in there to pay me. This is foolish. I started promoting the film on Facebook and other social networks, and eventually it caught the attention of a relative who anonymously donated some money to the campaign. I figured out who it was, and I told the director, I said, hey, someone in my family donated some money, and the director was really pleased with that. And anyway, so the crowdfunding went on and on. They didn't reach their goal, but I started working on some music, and I sent it off to the director. I said, what do you think? Never heard from them. A couple months went by. I tried the best I could to not be annoying, but be persistent. And still, nothing. And then suddenly, I got a message saying, hey, Jeff, sorry, we can't use your music because we kind of got our hands tied in post-production and we didn't want to miss these festival submission deadlines, so we went with like some temp music. But, really sorry. The next movie I work on, I'll totally bring you on board. And that didn't bother me that much that I didn't get the job. And I was, told I would. It bothered me that he knew that my relative donated that money. So what I'm getting at is, and this guy, the director, he never, I said, what about my relative's money? And he just never got back to me. And I see this guy's face, this director, I see him all over the TTC. He's in a semi-successful show now. He's doing just fine. So, it's no one's fault that my relative donated money and I didn't get the job. That's just bad luck. But what I'm saying is, if I had asked for a deposit up front, I at least would have had some money to pay back my relative when the project went south for me. So there's more reasons than that to ask for a deposit. It's just, good common sense. But that's a lesson learned for me, and I hope for you guys too. If you're going to do paid work, always ask for a deposit. And I should have probably defined what a deposit is. It's a percentage of your final fee. Whatever's on your invoice, that total, it's maybe 25-30% of it. You demand that up front, because if the project goes south for whatever reason, at least you have a little bit of money from that, from that initial transaction. Number 3, if you are going to work for free, make sure that you are not working for free. What I mean by that is make sure that something is still being exchanged. So if you're on LinkedIn, say, hey, I know you can't pay me, but it would mean the world to me if after all this is through, make this a condition even, that you endorse me and write a recommendation. And for those of you who aren't on LinkedIn, what this means is you create a profile and then you create a bunch of skills for yourself that other people who land on your page, if they know you, can, endorse and say, +1, +1, +1 for composing, +1 for, I don't know, mixing, producing, whatever. And then new people come to that page and go, oh, so-and-so has, 20 people saying +1 on composing. They must be pretty good. That's a kind of transaction, I think, that is, it's going to help you. It's going to add prestige and interest and a certain degree of professionalism to an outsider. So LinkedIn, write a testimonial for SoundCloud or for whatever website you have. That's another thing you can exchange. Another good one is to say, I would like access to the footage before this. Let's say you're working on a film that's going to go to a festival. I want access to the footage before it goes into a festival so I can make a cut and use that cut for my reel on my website. Now it can kind of get tricky because sometimes festivals don't allow the film to be shown anywhere outside of the festival. So when the festival airs it, then it's kind of kosher to, for whomever to be putting previews and trailers and stuff. But if that's the case, if it's locked until the festival date, then just ask for the audio, And if that's still, tricky and problematic, then just be patient. And like I said, LinkedIn, Facebook, testimonials, something needs to exchange hands. I don't think the satisfaction of just having completed another project is its own reward. There should be some social credit, going back and forth between you and the director or the producer or whomever you're working with. So that's the last one. And I want to add a couple things on that last one. If you are going to work for free, make sure the person you're working with has a bright future ahead of them in their industry. So, this gets tricky, right? Because how do you know that this director is going to make more movies or whatever? My answer to that would be, I meet people, I meet directors and producers, and if I can't, then I'll have a Skype conversation with them. And I get a pretty good sense of their passion, the level of commitment they have and excitement they have for what they do. And I can say with a certain degree of confidence that after 5 seconds I know whether or not they're doing this because they want to make movies for the rest of their lives, or at least in the near future, or if they just want a credit for IMDb so they can get into some acting union. That happens to be a thing that happens a lot. So you'll have to use your intuition and emotional intelligence to sort of gauge whether or not you're betting on the right horse. But that's how a lot of creative relationships, that's how they start. A director will start from the bottom just like you, be working with no money, sometimes just like you, a composer, and then they start their ascent. They get buzz, they get a bit of fame, And then they begin to get, budgets, and they know you and you know them because you met on the ground floor, and you can work together, and eventually the money starts coming in. That's happened to me a couple times with some people that I know. So that's another positive of working for free-ish. So those would be my tips going forward. To recap, always ask for a deposit. Be very careful about the word exposure. It's often just BS. And if you are going to work for free, make sure something is still changing hands, and make sure it's beneficial to you on a promotional level or something like that. I don't think there's any shame in working for free. I don't think it's embarrassing or beneath anyone to work for free, but I think you can be smart about it, and you can get something that's going to benefit you and your work in the long term. So that's what I have to say about that. All right? Comments, questions, blah, blah, blah. You know what to do. Thanks, guys.